Welcome to the Secure the Perimeter podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Secure the Perimeter podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about different things that entrepreneurs use in business and different measurables and tactics that we use to get you to the next level. And these things are really unconventional. They're not things that typical business owners learn at Harvard or Yale, but these are things that entrepreneurs learn along the way, mostly from the School of Hard Knocks. So let's get right into it. Today I've got my good friend Caden here. Caden and I are just going to be collaborating. Hopefully this content that we're sharing today is valuable to you. If it is, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and we'll give you new great content each and every week. So without further ado, let's get right into it. What's up, Caden?
What's up? Thanks for having me on the pod. Just a few opening things. What's a moment in your life where comfort actually made you weaker?
So I think a lot of business owners get this wrong because I think a lot of business owners are fighting for comfort. They're trying to find different ways to become comfortable, and I think that's the wrong mentality. At least that's the mentality that I do not use. I think that comfort gets you in trouble because comfort creates complacency. Even in our business, years of grinding and bootstrapping, it was never comfortable, and you're forced to make quick decisions, hasty decisions that will help you avoid the catastrophe and calamity of failures that really just sit around the corner of your business. And I think if you get comfortable and if you get complacent, you set yourself up for failure, because comfort really breeds not just complacency, but it really breeds a mentality where you're trying to avoid the hard thing, and really the hard thing is what gets you to the next level.
Right. Why do you think people avoid that hard thing, whatever it is?
Because it's uncomfortable. They don't like being uncomfortable. It reminds me of a time when I was taking part of amphibious operations. We were kind of small man teams, and we were doing 15-mile transits out to the ship, and we're on the Zodiac in February, and it's frigid temperatures, frigid water. It was so uncomfortable. And I just remember, just suffering the entire 3.5 hours to the ship, the Zodiac ripping through these Arctic temperatures. But to get there, this is the crux. The Zodiac, literally, we had to splash. And what that means is you had to literally pull your Zodiac out in the freezing waters, jump in the boat. The coxswain and a coxswain of the boat had to literally, basically we call them small swift boats, had to start the boat, and then from there you had to hit the initial 3-4 tide sets or waves just to get out to the ocean. And this is in February, so the waves are crashing inside the boat, and this is freezing temperatures. Those were unprecedented times, because those are times that we had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We just had to realize, we're just gonna have to suffer through this cold, icy water in February, because it's part of the journey. It's part of the, getting out to the ship is going through the temperatures of the water and crashing through the tide. And the initial plunge was audacious, because when we would hit the first tide set and the second tide set and the third tide set, literally the Zodiac would ramp the tide, and then when it would catch air, you're basically looking down on 30-foot swells. That you might have a 10-foot swell, but when the Zodiac ramps that first swell at 10 foot, you're basically looking down at 30 foot of void.
Yeah.
And that Zodiac smacking that water, dude, is excruciating. And so not only are you freezing to death, but you're literally getting beat to death on the Zodiac just to get out to the ocean.
Yeah.
So, it's the same in business. It's like every business owner wants to avoid the splash. Every business owner wants to avoid the uncomfortable situations, but you really have to embrace them and realize it's part of the journey, and it builds you. Basically, it helps create a titanium coating, for you as a human, as a person, to get through those things, whether you're a man or a woman. I mean, there's a lot of female business owners out there that have been through those experiences. So those were times that really, really shaped me and molded me as a person who can endure the hardships of business because of the experiences I had, when I was on boat teams.
Yeah, for sure. And the journey is kind of the whole point, isn't it? If you just reach your destination, you wouldn't probably be as well equipped or ready for whatever you had ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And for those people who want to avoid discomfort, even though they know growth is on the other side, what would you say to them?
I would say that get your mind wrapped around what the goal is. What's the goal? What are you trying to achieve through this? And if it's to become better, then your goal is the lesson that you get to learn through that experience, and not take it so personally. Too many people put emotion into it. I know we'll probably talk about this later in the podcast, but remove the emotion. Get rid of the emotion. The emotion doesn't serve you well. Too many people are emotional about things that happen. It's like, don't be emotional about it. Remove the emotion. And that literally primes the pump in how you endure things and how you get through hardships.
Yeah. So you mentioned a time while you served. What kind of core principles from combat, from your mental, did you take into the world of business?
Most everything I've learned in the Marine Corps and in combat have literally been the catalyst for my growth at Smart Digital, at my company. One, take well-aimed shots. That's one of the biggest. Instead of getting involved in too many things and inundating myself in the bandwidth, and allowing people to have access to my time, that's not fruitful, that's not useful. I have to take well-aimed shots, and I have to focus on the main thing and focus on the things that are mostly important. And that's just a matter of prioritizing my time and my tasks. That's one of the largest. Another one is being unemotional. Remove the emotion out of the equation. Emotion is not, there's no place for emotion on the battlefield. There's no place for emotion in business. It's business. It's combat. Remove the emotion, because emotion doesn't serve you in combat. Emotion doesn't serve you in business because it creates a gap or a vapor barrier of uncertainty.
Yeah. But what would you say, like, the fine line is between emotional control and suppression?
In what way? What do you mean by suppression?
So emotional control is you allow yourself to feel said thing. Emotional suppression is you just completely shut off.
Yeah, or buffer it.
Right.
Is that what you mean by suppression? Buffer the...
I mean, just completely cut off emotion, which, can lead to many things like resentment, and that can, lead to even more, it's just this big rabbit hole that you keep digging yourself. The more you kind of push it, kind of kick the can down the road, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think I understand the context of the question. Removing emotion just means don't take everything so personally. Everything is an attack, or everything, creates victim mentality. And you really need to avoid doing that, because creating the victim mentality, or, looking at it as a personal attack, is just, like you said, kicking the can down the road. You're just forbearing the problem. Really, removing the emotion just means don't take it personally.
Yeah.
This thing that happened, you have an issue with, with policies, or you have an issue with your customer or your vendor, or you have an issue with, a setback, that's something that happened. Too many people take it personally, and they just, they focus on the issue versus, moving through it without being emotional. And being unemotional doesn't mean, you turn off the switch and you literally just go through the experience null and void of emotion. It just means don't take it personal. Don't play the victim card, and don't look at it as a personal attack. It's not a personal attack.
Yeah.
It's just a thing that you have to overcome. And if you can get really good at overcoming obstacles and pivoting, you could manage the business well. If you can't do that and you can't seem to get through, the situation without taking it personally, without, looking at it as a personal attack, then it's going to be really hard for you to manage, the setbacks in the future, because they're going to get bigger.
Right. So moving back to kind of our combat to business, what similarities exist between the high pressure circumstances on the battlefield compared to, kind of the higher stake decisions you make as a business owner?
That's a great question, man. I think that I think it's really, it's similar in nature, because in combat, if you run out of ammo, you're dead.
Right.
And in business, if you run out of cash, you're dead.
Right.
You won't survive. You won't function. You won't make it. And so I think that, it's really transferable, and it's really relatable to me, because either one could be your demise. You can't run out of ammo in combat, and you can't run out of cash in a business. And the quicker that I was able to simulate the two, the symmetry and the geometry then all made sense. It really became the same thing, and it was the same sense of urgency not to run out of cash in business.
Yeah.
It was same sense of urgency not to run out of ammunition in combat. You always had to make sure that you had plenty of ammo,
Yeah.
for the next round of fight.
Right. And how did you make sure you had enough ammo, or kind of think on your feet to where you can get the most ammo, or where can I get the extra cash?
So that's a lot of great questions, man. I think that, in the Marine Corps, we used to use a tactic called economy of forces. It's just how you're employing your team, how you're employing your ammo, how you're employing all your resources. Even in Iraq, man, the Marine Corps was running so hard in the initial onslaught of that fight that we literally were very limited on rations, chow and water, as we call it, food and water.
Yeah.
And it was super crazy because it was so intense, in the initial stages of the fight. Your resources were everything. And so how did I manage that? Basically, we had to redistribute, chow and water and ammunition almost hourly, because of the movement and the aggressive nature in which we were moving in, from Kuwait to Baghdad. And so for me, it was, again, it's down to the sense of urgency. What's more important? What's the higher priority right now? And it was trying to analyze my priorities and trying to realize, okay, what's the higher priority right now? Chow and water or ammunition?
Yeah.
Well, we expect a hard fight, so we need to get ammo, to all the teams, and so we'd have to basically pull back all the ammo that we had, and we would have to redistribute it to the teams to make sure it was equally balanced for the gun teams, as opposed to just standard riflemen.
Yeah. So how does that translate into business terms now?
Same thing, man. I mean, it's very relatable, because in business, you have to look at your cash resources. How much cash do I have, and what do I need to invest that cash in? Because one thing successful entrepreneurs get right is the allocation of capital. How do I allocate my capital? And so that might be a daily, maybe even an hourly thing. You might have to look at ways you can allocate capital to basically be the most efficient in your growth and just surviving. When you're bootstrapping your business, the initial phases, you're just trying to survive. And so what do I need to survive? I need manpower.
Yeah.
And in order to have manpower, I have to have payroll. So you got to make sure you have enough cash to pay employees, because the worst thing you could ever do is not have enough cash to pay employees.
Yeah.
Because if you lose your employees, that's your bread and butter. I mean, that's your backbone, right?
Right. What do you think is more dangerous in business, fear or ego?
Oh man, I think I think both can be detrimental. What's worse? I would say ego's worse. Ego's worse because you got someone with ego, they think they got it figured out. And just like combat,
Yeah.
don't ever think you've mastered combat. Don't ever think you're the best because you get humbled real quick.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care how many times you've been training. I don't care how many years you've been training. I don't care how good you are. You've never conquered yourself until you realize that, there's more to know. There's more to learn.
Yeah.
And so fear, I believe fear could be managed. Fear happens innately, right? And I think that fear, is part of the job, and you have to learn how to manage fear. But people who have an ego, it's really hard to get over someone with an ego because those people are arrogant. Those people are pompous. And I think the book of Proverbs speaks about this very, very candidly. But ego is not served well, and ego has no place on the battlefield. Ego has no place in business.
Yeah.
And I really believe, and I've seen it. I've seen people with a big ego in business, and those people are not in business anymore.
Yeah.
Because they thought they had it all figured out. They thought that they were the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And I think those people are the people that literally live behind a placard or a title. They're not a leader. They don't get in front of the team and serve the team. They're there to hide behind that title.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned the book of Proverbs. It's actually the first book of the Bible I actually read. Started off with Proverbs and got into the Gospels, but it provides a great segue into our next kind of topic here. But what is more of a kind of like a general question? What kind of biblical principles have you taken from your, experience just in life into your business?
That's a big question, man. And I think that's a very dense and deep question. For me, I think putting God first, number one, put God first. I think too many, and I'm going to say this boldly, and I'm probably going to offend a lot of people. I think too many people are hearsay leaders. I think that they're very fragile when it comes to their humility with God. I think putting God first is the most important principle in life. Forget business. I think life. And there's so much scripture that's wrapped around giving God our first fruits. What people don't realize is, most people don't realize, is giving God your first fruits is not only giving him the best portion of your harvest, whatever that harvest is, whether it be, money, whether it be crops, whether it be, new revenue in your business, but first fruits are a demonstration of faith. That's really what it is. Trust God first, not the world.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's looking for some kind of crumbs in life. Like they're looking around for the next thing that's going to help them. And really, their eyes need to be in the skies. They need to be really relying on God to do that. If they're a believer, of the faith and they believe in Christ, they really need to be relying on God, because that's a demonstration of their faith, first and foremost, through anything. And I have seen this time and time again in my own life, in my own business, in my own experiences, even in combat. Put God first, and so I would pray before every battle and ask God to influence me and give me the right mindset, give me the right clarity, give me the right peace in my soul about what we were to endure. And as it always, happened, I got the clarity that I needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and then how do you keep that faith when, especially as a business owner, and you start to grow, that ambition, that money and success starts to grow?
Ooh, that's another good one, man. You got a lot of good questions. I think, man, it's easy, so easy for people, and this is what I was talking about, leaders. I don't look at leadership the same way most people do, because I came from, from the military, the Marine Corps, where some of the finest leaders you've ever met in your life exist, and they are just dudes that do the right thing no matter what. And I think doing the right thing, I think that, for me, it's like it's easy to lose, your faith when you start getting the, success, when the money starts to come in. I think it's easy for a lot of people to just let off the gas with God and just be like, I got it from here, and they try to go on an autopilot. Those same people aren't people who have ever read the book of Ecclesiastes and learned a lot about King Solomon. King Solomon was the most wealthy man of all time. I don't think there's anybody that was more wealthy than King Solomon. And, I think the fortune and the fame got to his head, and he learned. Yeah. And I think Solomon came back to God, but I think I really think that is, it's a vulnerability and it's a risk that every, not just business owner, but person takes when things start going well for them. They let their foot off the gas with God, and they think they got it from there.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately they find out they get humbled real quick, because those shiny things they're chasing are just momentary.
Right.
Again, like the book of Proverbs speaks about.
Right.
I want to say it's Proverbs 23. Maybe, hopefully I got that right. But a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, and poverty will come on you like a thief in the night. In other words, don't let off the gas.
Yeah.
Don't think you got it.
Yeah.
Because if you do and you start getting lax, poverty will come on you like a thief in the night.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment in your business career where you, maybe in hindsight, found that you were chasing success more than you were chasing God?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, at times I wasn't focused. Yeah, I would be remiss if I said no. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of times I had my head, I'm looking down at the ground. And what I mean by that in context is I'm paying attention to the things that I think are going to bring me success, and I'm getting inundated with just stuff that was just making me more busy.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to God for clarity. I wasn't going to God for direction or influence. I was just trying to rely on the next thing.
Yeah. And what is, because you say like the first fruits, and ultimately it's about having God first. What does that look like, and what changes when someone truly puts God first?
It's really an interesting paradigm shift, because it's kind of scary, to be honest, because you're relying on God, who is one of the biggest mysteries of life, is the kind of identity that God has, but you're relying on God to get you through these things, not the things that you're used to helping you get through those things. Like, you think that, hey, if I got money, I can do this, and if I got this, this girl, and I get married to this girl, then that's going to help me get through, the next phase of my life. But the reality is, to me, God is the root of all that. God's the root of all of those things. And I think that, for a lot of people, they get too focused and too busy on the daily, thing. They're looking down at the ground, or they got their face in social media 8 hours out of the day, and they're not relying on God to get them through the things that they're experiencing and going through in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you ever, I guess, let me rephrase, how did you come to the faith? And were you kind of a skeptic before? Or, because for me, I kind of have my ebbs and flows, and, this past year I've kind of really questioned, like, is this something I truly believe in? What's kind of the evidence, or, what are people's testimonies saying about it? So first, I have two questions, but how did you initially come to the faith?
Oh, man, that's intense. So, I love the questions, man. I really do. And I think this is good for all the entrepreneurs out there and people. Like, if you're listening to this podcast and you're questioning your own faith, I think this is a great podcast for you. Because I was, when I was in the Corps, I was the dude that deployed all the time. I volunteered for everything. I went through more training schools than I could shake a stick at. I had 3 MOSs, which really is your primary job, in the military, is your MOS. Well, I had 3 of those. Mm-hmm. And so I literally did everything. And I wanted to be a career Marine. I wanted to stay in the Marine Corps forever. But I had an epiphany in Baghdad. This is a true story. I remember waking up with absolute clarity that I wanted to get out of the Corps. And this is right after I learned I was in the zone to be promoted to E6. I was in the zone. I was selected to be promoted to staff sergeant, which is huge. Like, it was a huge monumental point in my career. But I just remember waking up in Baghdad. I just had this high definition dream that I was going to get out and start a family. I don't know where that came from. It was insane. Well, I even thought about that. I don't even know why I had the dream, other than it was God speaking to me. Brent, in that, sleeping bag in Baghdad.
Yeah.
When I was a platoon sergeant of combat teams.
Yeah.
And so for me, that kind of started the journey, and I had all these epiphanies along the way, and I haven't shared a lot about the details of that, but I had a hard time transitioning out of the Marine Corps to the civilian sector. In fact, it was one of the darkest moments of my life, because you're literally, it's like taking a race car off of the NASCAR speedway at 300 miles an hour and then going to zero.
Yeah.
It was a hard transition for me. And I know a lot of other veterans experience the same thing. When you're coming from that kind of environment, when every day you eat and sleep performance, and you go to zero, you get out and you go to zero, you literally lose sense of your identity and your purpose.
Yeah.
And so you question your faith, you question everything. And so when I got out of the Corps, I remember telling my wife before, this is long before we had kids, I had episodes of bad PTSD. I remember telling my wife, after trying to drink, a ton, I tried to go to counseling. That didn't work. I went right through the counseling. The VA tried to medicate me. I went through bottles of pills. That didn't work. I tried to drink myself to oblivion. That didn't work. I remember telling my wife, I'm standing in the kitchen, and my wife came in the kitchen, and she's like, I really think you need to go talk to somebody, else. And I'm like, it's not going to work. And I just remember telling her, I said, I think the only thing that's going to work for me is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Dude, and I had tears coming down my eyes. My wife was crying because she didn't know how to help me.
Yeah.
And so, that was part of my faith journey. I was questioning, this thing called God, and do I really believe, much like you had just said, for yourself, do I really believe? Is this really going to get me through? Is God really going to get me through this?
Yeah.
And I had to go through a lot of prayer and a lot of intentional conversations with myself, and I'll tell you, the best conversation you can ever have is a conversation with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a conversation with someone who's in sports or a celebrity. It's, or someone famous. The best conversation you can ever have is an honest conversation with yourself.
Yeah. And
we have to be honest with ourselves to say, does it really all come down to me, or is there something greater than myself?
Yeah.
So for me, that was part of my journey, and it creeps its head, every now and then. I think we all go through those seasons where we question our faith, but the reality is God is the source of all the energy we can ever hope for. God is the source for all the love that we could ever hope for. And all the things that I found in the Bible are all true. Like, if we would just live the way Christ tells us to live, we could create a better life.
Yeah.
Loving people and forgiving people fast. And I think we'll talk about that, but you got to forgive, man. You got to forgive people and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I was kind of similar. Not that I served, but I've been an athlete for more years than I have not. I started playing soccer when I was about 3 years old, and I played, all the way to the collegiate level. And, after I kind of parted ways with that, I was kind of like you. I was like, well, this was kind of like my whole identity. Where do I go from now? I got to get a job. I got to keep doing school and, all these things. And I kind of was left just,
yeah, man.
Where do I go from here? But yeah, like, I feel like, I think I saw something the other day, like there's kind of like this wave of Gen Z who are really starting to be bold and come to the faith, which I think is awesome. But sometimes I also think, is this a trend? Is this something that is just kind of in the here and now? And that's why I kind of struggle with sometimes. Like, okay, what's like the scholarly consensus? What does the Bible say compared to, what the, can't think of the word, the manuscripts say and all these things. So do you think, or maybe why do you think most people accept information without questioning it, or they kind of go with the crowd?
I mean, I think it comes down to what Christ told us. I mean, really, we're all a bunch of sheep.
Yeah.
And we see the next shiny object and we're off to the right. We lose sight of focus. We lose sense of direction because it's this new shiny thing, or we think that's going to be the thing that gets us through. That's the new antidote, right?
Yeah.
And really, you find yourself kind of like the swine, going over the side of the cliff, into the water and drowning. It's like you're just chasing the next shiny thing.
Yeah. And this could be applied to, just general life or the faith as well. But how do you balance being a skeptic and a student? At what point does skepticism become cynicalism?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think it can be very misleading because, we're skeptic of a lot of things, right? We're skeptic of, politics. We're skeptic of, the thing that's going to get you through versus cynicism. I think cynicism is the feeling of what's created from all the skepticism or all the things that happen. And so you get very cynical. I really think that that's the devil kind of creeping in. It's the devil's lies, the devil's whisper each and every day to get us off track and get us off focus. It's a great question, man, but because I tell people this a lot. The devil's like a sniper on the rooftop, right?
Yeah.
Him and his demons, all of his cronies. They're literally snipers on the rooftop. And most people stand out on the battlefield holding this latte, standing in their Ugg boots, thinking that they're going to envelop in spiritual warfare, not realizing that the devil is a mastermind in that space.
Yeah.
He will eat you alive, just like the enemy. The sniper on the rooftop. That's a dangerous situation because that sniper on the rooftop is in a very privileged or a very good position.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, he takes out your head or your heart. Either one of those are kill shots. It's the same in the Bible. If the devil takes out your head or your heart, he gets control of your mind or he gets control of your heart. Game over. And in life, we have to be cognizant of that. We have to realize if we're not praying and we're staying consistent and being close to the Spirit each and every day, we are literally vulnerable and we are prey on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Because that sniper on the rooftop, that demon, that devil, is literally trying to take one kill shot, either to the head or the heart or both. And when they do that, it's game over because now you're just prey to the world.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that the devil isn't, some guy on the rooftop. I think, people maybe have this misconception that the devil is this ugly or scary creature. But I think also I was watching a video about this the other day where this guy, he was painting this picture depicting of his image of the devil, and it was this, he looked like a Greek god. He was 6 foot tall. He was sculpted. I think a lot of these things that the devil throws at us are the things we want to see, or the things that we internally would like.
Well said.
Because we see, when the devil meets Jesus, and I think it's Matthew, he's reading all the scripture to him. He knows the Bible in and out. He knows what we want as flesh and bones. So yeah, I think you're right that the devil is always looking at us, but he's not always on that rooftop. He may be right with us.
That's well said, man. What's more dangerous, an enemy you can see or an enemy you can't see?
That you can't see.
Enemy you can't see.
Yeah.
I've never met the devil.
Yeah.
Physically, I've never met him, but I feel him every day.
Yeah.
It's an enemy we can't see, and that's the dangerous part about the devil. We can't see him. Christ probably didn't see a physical devil that day when he was tempted in the desert, but he felt the spiritual influence of the devil,
Yeah.
trying to tempt him to jump off of the cliff, and commit suicide. Because the devil was telling him to jump off the cliff and he would give him everything. And that was a pivotal moment, right? Because it's not a devil that Jesus saw.
Right.
It was the influence, the spiritual influence of the devil.
Right.
And so the enemy we can't see is the most dangerous enemy.
Right. Well, it goes back to the story of the pigs and the demon possessed man, where the demon went in straight to the pigs and they jumped off the cliff.
Yeah, man.
So
And that's a great story, right? Because Christ had the authority to move those spirits.
yeah,
That's insane when you think about that.
yeah,
Insane. And to use that and know that very fact that Christ has authority over those spirits, God has authority over that dominion. That's crazy.
yeah. Well, moving on to our next topic here, forgiveness, and we talked about removing emotion earlier, but forgiveness and removing emotion. Why is forgiving quickly more beneficial to you than the other person?
Man, it's good question. I'll take you to a time in my business when I had to forgive someone, and I'll tell you how I did it. And I'm not even joking about this. I'll just say someone in business really did me wrong, bad. Like it was detrimental. It was a pivotal moment because I thought this person was going to be a breakthrough to the next level, and at the last minute they pulled out, right? And it almost crushed me, and I couldn't see a way out. I thought that was my demise. I thought it's over with, man. And this person is literally going to be my demise. I'm going to have to close the business down. And I just feel like God was telling me to forgive this person. And I'll tell you how God told me to forgive this person. And I know it was God because of what God called me to do. I was driving down the road, and this is the day that COVID was announced and the governor shut our state down that day. It was that day I feel like God called me to go to this person's house and knock on their big, audacious front door. And the person invited me in, and I went in and I prayed with him and his wife. That's how I forgave this dude. I'm not kidding. 2 hours before that, I wanted to put a boot knife in this guy's throat and bleed him out. That's how bad it was. Like, I just had all these negative emotions going through me. Like, this dude really did me wrong. He hurt me, and he could have affected my business. But I heard God call me to just go to this guy's house and go inside and pray with him and his wife. And I forgave him. And God told me, as I'm having this influence, God called me to forgive this dude. And I'm not joking. That is the biggest, most monumental moment of my life because it taught me how to forgive people and cut it loose. And so when I say remove the emotion, what I'm trying to say is don't let emotion control you, just like fear. Fear is an emotion, and it's not a good emotion. It's a bad emotion.
Right.
Christ, how many times in the New Testament tells us to not fear?
Yeah.
Don't fear. We're called to be bold. We're called to be lions. And in that moment, when I was able to learn how to forgive this dude, and literally by forgiving him, going all the way and literally praying with this dude, not praying for this dude, like most people, forgive this person.
Yeah.
No, God told me to go to his front door, knock on his front door, walk into his house, and pray with him and his wife.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, don't know how I conjured the energy to do what was required of me that day.
Yeah.
But the moment I did that, it was a freaking release from all of that negative energy and all that toxicity. I literally forgave the dude, and I cut it loose. And to this day, I have nothing ill to say about the guy.
Wow.
I cut it all loose that day. I cut it all loose. And it was such a freeing, liberating, independent moment for me that I literally gave up the ghost of this negative energy, for this guy. And it helped me grow so much by doing that.
Yeah.
And I encourage everybody, if you have someone that you don't get along with or that you hate, forgive that person. Forgive that person and move on.
Yeah.
It's liberating for you.
Yeah, well said. What's the cost of holding on to resentment? So say that you never forgave that guy, and you guys
Dude,
went separate ways, but you never forgave him. Where would you think you would be right now?
I would say that resentment is like an anchor. It is an anchor. It's exactly like an anchor. It pulls you under the water. It's the cost of your breath. It's literally costing you all of your breath because you can't breathe, because all you think about is that person.
Yeah.
The person who did you wrong, your childhood, your past. Everybody has a childhood. Everybody has a past. I know dudes that literally were tier 1 operators in the military and have no relationship with their parents because it's such a vile relationship with their parents. It's insane. You think about, that parent should be grateful for their kid. Their kid did this great stuff. And so for people, it's the cost of everything, because you can't grow when you've got someone pulling you under the water, because all you think about is that person who did you wrong. So I think it costs you everything.
Yeah. And why do you think it's so difficult for people to say no or to forgive? Do you think it goes back to ego, what we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, man. I think ego is a big part of it. They can't get out of their own way. They're right. They're stubborn, whatever you want to call it. It's just, at the end of the day, the root of it is ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Ego can go, I think it can get you a lot of places, but it can also bring you straight down where you started.
Agreed.
How do emotions cloud decision making and leadership in business?
I think that emotions cloud a lot of people's mindsets, because emotions, when you're making decisions based off of emotions, it's really difficult, because people get their heart wrapped up in the decision, and they're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at the bird's eye view of what they're actually trying to achieve. And I see this time and time again, and I've been guilty of it numerous times, where I'm trying to make the decision based on my emotions. Those two don't go together. They really don't. Because if I filter through all the stuff that I really want, it really eliminates all the reasons that I would have made the decision based on the emotion. Because what I really want is the end result of doing better, being better, getting better results. And if I cut out the emotion, I'm cutting out probably 90% of the context in which I'm making the decision for.
Yeah.
Because it's really overinflated when I'm trying to make a decision based on emotion. Using an example of that, like, I want to achieve a certain objective, in life. And so in order to do that, I have to cut out these things, and I'm not willing to cut out these things because I like these things, right? The reality is, without cutting out these things, like hanging out, barbecuing, I don't drink very much, but having beers with, the guys, is any of that fruitful toward the end result? No. Cut it out.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Like, am I going to hang out with my buddy or some of my friends versus work out? I mean, if I do that, then I'm not going to be able to work out. If I can't work out, I can't get physically better.
Yeah.
I can't sharpen my mental clarity. And so if I cut the emotion out of it and I say, what result do I want? Well, I want to be physically agile. I want to be mentally agile. Well, then you have to cut out the things that you really desire and the things you really want.
Yeah.
So that's why I think emotion is just, I really think emotion's bad in most any decision you make.
Yeah. What kind of man or person does suffering create?
I think suffering, if you endure it and you go through it and you do the hard thing, I think it creates a warrior, physical and mental warrior. For instance, I use the analogy of the experience on the teams, on boat teams, when, we had to go through the suffering of the 15-mile transit out to the ship. I mean, that's hardcore. Like, that is lights on to suffering. Yeah. That's definitely one of those moments that lights were on to the suffering. Physical endurance, man, like going on a 20-mile, hump with all of our gear on our back, and you're carrying 60, 70 pounds, full combat load, for 20, 25 miles straight.
Yeah.
That is arduous, and that will test your intestinal fortitude to the core. Going through those things, and just going through it and seeing it through, I think that's the big thing. Whatever the suffering is, whether you're trying to quit alcohol, you're trying to quit smoking, you're trying to have a better relationship with your family, your kids, you have to suffer in order to get to that end result.
Right.
And if you're willing to go through the suffering and not give up and see it through, on the other side of that suffering is literally the dude or the girl that you're trying to pursue.
Yeah.
On the other side of the suffering. I think it's imperative, and I think it does create the warrior mentality and the warrior tenacity, the titanium coating, as I call it.
Yeah. And I just have a few closing questions. So we've talked about, everything from business to faith, emotions, decision making. What is one uncomfortable truth that you think people need to hear right now? No pressure.
One uncomfortable truth in regard to life, faith, business. What do you mean? Can you elaborate?
I think anything. I can think of quite a few regarding faith or maybe business, but just one uncomfortable truth that you think people need to hear.
Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get comfortable with it. Make friends with uncomfortable. I believe anything good in life doesn't come from comfort. I think that's one of the hardest truths people have to face. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Look, if you want to be financially free, then quit spending $7 on Starbucks. Quit going to the movie theater. Quit spending money on clothes. Stop spending money on yourself. Quit.
Yeah.
Start doubling down and working harder and, selling stuff.
Yeah.
You don't need all that stuff. Sell it.
Yeah.
Well, I got to have – no, you don't. Sell it. Get rid of it. Put a price tag on everything you own. Get yourself out of debt. But people aren't willing to do that because it's uncomfortable. Because it's, life's boring if I can't go to the movie theater, if I can't go to the store and shop and spend money on clothes. If you're in debt, going the wrong way. Sell everything you own. Be a minimalist, as they call it. And live your life in essentialism and have 2 T-shirts and a pair of jeans and a pair of socks, maybe 2 pair of socks. But you don't need all that stuff. Get rid of it. But a lot of people aren't willing to go through the suffering, to get them, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, some people, of doing those kind of things to get themselves financially free, get out of debt completely.
Yeah.
Eliminate your mortgage. Oh, I can't do that. I got a 30-year mortgage. You can get rid of your mortgage. If you just consolidate and if you just create yourself a budget, you could get rid of your mortgage in probably half the amount of time.
Yeah.
Pay off your vehicle. Hey, if you owe money on a vehicle, sell the vehicle. Sometimes even at a loss, sell it.
Yeah. Get
rid of it and buy something simple, just an old beat-up pickup truck. That'll get you back and forth to work, or a small little economy car.
Yeah.
Just get a small economy car and drive that for 5 years and pack your cash away. And that's one of the biggest ones, I think, is finances. Too many people get in debt because they have to live status quo. And I just think that's one of the biggest lies. And I think it's one of the biggest, hardest truths that most people have to acknowledge.
Yeah. And what legacy are you hoping to leave behind?
The legacy I'm trying to leave behind is a legacy for my kids. I hope to influence people. I hope to encourage people and let people know that, life is really a journey. And I also believe that there's never a finish line. So the legacy that I want to leave is how to build and how to grow. I think God created us to be creators. If we're made in the image of God, from Genesis 1:1, God is a creator. He created things, and he still creates things. And so if I'm made in the image of God, then I'm here to be a creator, a curator, a culture driver, and to give people encouragement that there's more to life than just the way we've always been doing it, you know. So the legacy I would want to leave is stomp your own path, do your own thing. And if I could encourage people to do that, stomp their own path and create their own culture, create their own lifestyle, that's really what it's all about. Instead of this lifestyle that people, you know, put out in front of us, you know, it's like, well, this is the way to be. It's like, I disagree.
Yeah.
So I question those things.
Well, Brent, that's all the questions I got for you today.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate the podcast. I appreciate the questions, and hopefully we've encouraged a lot of people today and given people a lot of useful insight.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. And this has been the Secure the Perimeter podcast.